Hello everyone, I'm Don Cholish, Lead Product Manager for Footprints, and in this video I'm going to discuss what's new with version 12.1.07. Since some of you are viewing this before the product is officially released, just some legal matters. This is just for you and your organization. It can't be shared outside of your organization. Anything I'm showing you here has a possibility of changing in the future. Footprints 12.1.07 technically is the 7th service pack in the 12.1 release of Footprints, but it's a very large service pack, so there's a lot of stuff in there. There's a lot of work we've done. So you're going to see that as I go through this presentation and as you use the product. As with any of our releases, obviously correcting defects is something we want to make sure to always keep on top of. We want to make sure to keep the product stable no matter what we do, what new things we introduce, etc. But in general, you're going to see some new product capabilities, specifically filling gaps from version 11 of the product, some improved user experience, some reporting updates, better keyboard navigation and 508 compliance for those that are interested in that compliance, as well as some third-party platform support. First, I want to talk about allowing people to view tickets by organizational unit. For a lot of people, people want to allow people from the same company or from the same department, would be the two most common things, to be able to see and maybe edit each other's tickets. So as you can see from the screenshot here, if you just kind of go into the address book, there's a new button to be able to set the organizational unit field to what you want. In this case, department is highlighted. And then you want to make sure to kind of go into the workspace and add that additional permission. You can see the organizational unit permission at the bottom to allow people to view additional tickets or to even edit them, which isn't shown there. So this is for the common example of maybe there's multiple people at the same company that you're supporting, that company as a whole. Maybe one person submits something, but another person wants to be able to view it and update it because that first person is maybe busy or on a vacation or no longer there, or we need to work with multiple people in order to help solve their problem. So this will allow people from the same company, the same department, to be able to view each other's tickets. Of course, always controlled by the role. So a few things I want to just talk about, steps to kind of configure this and some things you need to know about it, and then we'll actually go into the product and take a look at it. First, obviously, you want to choose which address book field you want to be your organizational unit field. Like I mentioned, most people are going to pick department or company, depending on what they're trying to accomplish. Then you want to make sure that field exists on your ticket form. Well, not necessarily on the form, but that's most likely what you're going to want to do. But if you have to choose the field department in the address book, you want to make sure there's a field with the exact same name, department, on the ticket itself. This is how we're going to determine who gets to see what tickets. So, for example, when someone first logs in, we're going to find their contact in the address book, see what organizational unit they're a part of, so maybe they're part of the sales department, and then we're going to look at all the tickets that have department with the value of sales, and we'll be able to show them those tickets, assuming they have that permission. Since the department field in this example needs to be populated for the ticket, it would make sense to make that a linked field. So every time you link the contact to the ticket, that department field automatically gets filled out. So you don't have to manually fill it out or have something else that's going to fill it out later. Next, obviously, you're going to want to go into the role, and for the roles that you do want to get this extra permission to see these additional tickets or edit them, you could go enable that. A few comments about external address books, such as LDAP. So you might not be aware of this, but the way the product currently works is when you're using an external address book, the very first time a contact gets linked to a ticket, we automatically make a local copy into the Footprints database. So that local copy gets stored just like you were using an internal address book. So we do this because, then various places throughout the product, we don't always have to go back to the external source to get the information. We have it locally, and it can be used much the same as our internal address book code. So this is important to note because if there is no local copy, this additional permission is not going to work. But like I mentioned, as long as that contact was ever linked to at least one ticket, they're going to have a local copy. And then something additional we did as part of this feature that we delivered is we made sure upon first login, we're also going to create a local copy. So maybe someone's logging in for the first time, other people from their company or department have logged tickets. They'll be able to see them when they initially first log in. So the only example where someone wouldn't necessarily be able to see things is if they never logged in and they were never linked to a contact. So maybe if they got an email about something, they might not have permission to see it necessarily when you think they should. So that's something to be aware of. We need to make sure there's always a local copy. All right, let's take a look at the product. So now I'm in the product. Let's go through and kind of quickly configure this. So first we're going to want to go to administration and go into the address book that we want and make sure that field that we want, in my case I'm going to choose department, is the organizational unit field. So I'll select department, I'll set as organizational unit, and you can see organizational unit is set to yes. And then I'll kind of just save and publish this. Okay, so now that we have that field set, the next thing we want to do is make sure to go to the workspace that we're going to want to use to give people additional access to some of these tickets. So in my case, I'll go to the service desk, I'll go to the incident, and I need to make sure I have a field. Doesn't necessarily have to be on the form, but it makes sense to be on the form, so I'll create it from there. That has that field named department. So I could go to the contact information section, and I'll add a field called department. I'll pick a drop-down field. So most likely we have a limited set of departments. And then I'll configure my choices. So I name my field department and quickly added a few choices. Now we go back to the agent web form. It makes sense now that we have this contact link control to also add department as a linked field, so it automatically gets populated. So let's configure that. Go into linked fields. We could add the newly added department. Save, and then save the form. And now we're going to have to save and publish. Okay, now that we've published, let's log in as a few users, see what they could see, and then maybe change their roles and then see what they could see afterwards. I've logged in here to the application as user Bill Smith, and looking at his incidents, you can see he has several incidents that he has access to. 2 of them happen to be globals, but the rest are things that either he submitted or he's linked to. Most importantly, you can see he doesn't have access to incident number 15. When I switch to user Tom Jones, you can see he has access to incident number 15. In fact, besides these 2 globals, that's the only other one he could see. If I switch back to where I'm logged in as an administrator, you can see Bill Smith and Tom Jones both work for the legal department. So what I'm going to do is update Bill's role, so he should then be able to see 15. But you're going to see Tom, that has a different role, is not going to be able to see all of Bill's. Let's go to administration and then roles. And I actually already had this up and filtered by service desk. So I know Bill is the read, submit, edit role. So let's edit that. I'll go into the item permissions, expand the incident, expand viewing, and you can see we have this organizational unit which was set to no. I'll set it to yes and save. Now that that's saved, let's switch and go see what the other users can see. So after logging out and logging back in as Bill Smith, because you have to do that in order for roles changes to take effect, let's go take a look at the incidents. And now looking at Bill Smith's final list, you can see he does have access to incident number 15. You can see you can't edit though because I didn't update that permission. And if I switch back to Tom Jones, who's in the same department, you can see nothing new got added to his list because I didn't update his role, so he doesn't have this extra permission, even though he's in the same legal department as Bill Smith. So next, we have some improvements for the layout and the ability to filter on the history. So as you can see here at the bottom, the history is a much more consolidated view. In the past, when someone made an update, there might be 3 or 4 or 5 different expandable, collapsible sections for the same update. So one might be a set of the fields that the person updated, the next would be the billing information, the next would be the time tracking, other rules that ran were separate. So now for each update, if it's initiated by a user or a rule, it's going to show all the things that happened as a result of that update in one expandable, collapsible section. So you could expand and collapse all like you could before, and as you see towards the bottom, number of records per page, you could see a lot more without having a page, and you could set this and it'll save whatever you have set it. And then most importantly, you could also filter these. So if you only wanted to see a subset of these to narrow down what you're looking for quickly, you could do that as well. So let's look at the product. So let me go into this change request here. And I'll quickly jump to the history. So you can see the new consolidated view. If I expand all, and maybe scroll down a little bit to maybe one of the entries that has a lot of information in it, like the first time you create a ticket. So you can see, a long time ago actually, I'm looking at a very old ticket. At this date and time, I created this ticket, I set a bunch of fields, This information with the time tracking was in its own separate area. This information with the billing was in its own separate area. I think of some of these other things as well. If rules had ran, they would have had their own separate expandable collapsible section as well. So now every update that's made, everything that changes is all going to be in one section. Also, you can increase the number of results, like I mentioned before, and then maybe most importantly, you could do the filtering. So maybe I want to filter and see when the impact was changed. See, quickly it gives me results, impact set to medium. That was the only time it was ever set, and this date and time by this user. So this filtering will be very useful. You see that filtering came back almost immediately. So it's only going to be filtering on what's shown here. So you do have the ability to go up to 800 different events from the past. So you should easily be able to find what you need to do. If you have more than 800, unfortunately, you're going to have to page. So next I want to talk about some improved keyboard navigation. So your agents are going to have the ability to navigate through the system for their daily use without having to touch the mouse. General navigation's been improved, so making sure all tabs, shift tabs, arrows, enter to move around, to move to different sections, etc. All that is going to be fully supported. So there were a lot of improvements in that area to just make sure that general navigation worked. Also, some keyboard shortcuts when you're on the form, so when you're creating and editing a ticket, for example. As you know, on the form you have several different sections on the left-hand side. If you want to jump from section to section so you don't have to tab 50, 100 times to get from one field to another, if the fields are far apart, you can just do Alt-Q and it'll allow you to jump from section to section. So I'll demonstrate that. Control-S, the standard for saving, will allow you to save your ticket. And then Alt-S will allow you to submit it, so save it and close the tab at the same time. There's also a new portal theme, which I'll show you as well. It might be convenient for some people. So normally when you're in a field, you could see your cursor blinking, you know exactly where you are. A lot of times when you're on a button, the button gets highlighted. But sometimes it might be difficult to know where you are as you're tabbing through or as you're switching from one application back and forth to footprints. The administrator has the ability to enable this theme, which will put a little orange box around where the current focus is, so you won't get lost. So some people might find that useful. And also those people that are interested in the criteria for the 508 requirements, which is a law in the U.S. There's about 50 or so criteria, so a lot of those footprints had always complied with, so we just added 2 additional ones, which specifically revolve around keyboard navigation now that footprints also complies with. All right, let's take a look in the product. So maybe I'll just click on home with the mouse first, and then maybe I'll close this. But if I'm on home, I could actually use my arrows left and right to switch to these different tabs, or these different consoles, I should say, using appropriate terminology. And then if I actually tab, I could kind of go through, and you can see it's highlighting these different buttons. Eventually it's going to go through the search, so I have the ability to search. And I'm doing all this through the keyboard. It's going through the left-hand side now. Just went through those different widgets. And now, once again, once I'm on this menu, I have to use the arrows to go back and forth, maybe view, edit, whatever is currently highlighted. So it happened to be this change request number 1 happened to be highlighted. But if I go to tab twice, I could actually jump in, and maybe if I wanted to go to a different change request, like this change request 19, I could just use the down arrows to get there, hit enter, and it's going to take me right to the view form, and then you can see edit's already highlighted, so I can just hit enter again if I want to kind of go in and edit. And then just kind of tabbing through, I could get from field to field. When I get to a drop down, I could just use the down arrows and then enter to choose what I want. But I mentioned some of the shortcuts, so the Alt-Q is going to allow me, after I do that, it's going to move to the sections on the left-hand side, and I can use the arrow to jump from section to section. So maybe I want to look for linked tickets, for example. Just hit enter and it'll take me there. You can see link to is already highlighted, so I can just hit enter, but right and left will allow me to kind of navigate. And then if I want to make any saves, I have the ability to do that as well with the shortcuts. So I'm just going to use the Alt-S to do the submit. And it's telling me I have some required fields, so I didn't type in a description. I could just, once again, using only the keyboard, not the mouse for any of this, just hit enter and click OK on that, acknowledge that that I have to fill out these mandatory fields, and it put the cursor right in where I had to fill out the mandatory information. So once again, I could just do Alt-S. All that was done without touching the mouse, only the keyboard. Next, we could look at the theme that's going to allow you to navigate around easier by highlighting where you are. So we could go into portals and create a new portal. So I quickly put in a name and uploaded some probably fairly ridiculous image, but you can see now there's a new theme called accessibility. And then just to be quick and dirty, I'll just put the built-in home console as my only. Now I have this additional accessibility portal I could switch to. And you can see right away the orange highlight. So as I tab, it's going to easily show me where I am. So I kind of don't lose focus. And then kind of the same if I go to create a new issue. It'll show me the focus kind of within as well. Alt Q kind of takes me to the left hand side. So that could be useful to some people. So it's something as an administrator you could enable and allow people to use. Next, let's talk about reporting. So behind the scenes, a lot of our reporting is driven by a third-party engine. And as a result of updating that, we got some kind of new look and feel and some additional things to share with you. So as you can see, the charts themselves look newer and a lot better. And there are some additional things as well that you have the ability to do, which you didn't have the ability to do before. Let's go over an overview of the additional things that are now available. So as I mentioned, we have the new modern charts. You have the ability for like a pie chart to maybe hover over a slice and it'll actually show you the count that slice takes up if you decided to not show the count as part of the label. For the pies, you have the ability to, instead of showing counts, show percentages. So that's new and might be useful to some people. For bar charts, you have the ability to do subtotals. So maybe you could do priority subtotal by status or category subtotal by priority. And you could choose to either stack them one on top of the other or do it side by side. So I'll show some examples of that. Some streamlined PDFs. So the general reporting layout now is changed, as you're going to see. Charts kind of go above the table that lists all of the items in your report. Same thing happens with the PDFs. But that listing, there's a lot less padding on it. So if you have a couple hundred or 1,000 tickets in kind of a list in your PDF, I think someone made a comment. It went from like 42 pages to 20-something pages. So it makes it a little bit streamlined, easier to read, and kind of a just overall smaller size. Larger console widgets with chart resize capabilities. So as you know, we have the new charts. They actually were naturally slightly bigger, and we didn't want to shrink them and kind of take away from their visibility. So we decided to make the console widgets a little bit bigger. So this cuts into kind of your views, but you always have the ability to expand and collapse those consoles. So it should make it much easier to kind of view the charts that are in the consoles. You also have the ability to just manually resize any chart, whether it's in a console or in the report itself, if you want to make it bigger or smaller. And then also with some reports, you have the ability to change the width of the column to be able to see more or less information. So let's take a look. So once in the application, I'll click on Service Analytics, and then maybe I'll look at one of my existing custom reports. So I'll scroll down, and you can see I have a list of kind of incidents here. I'll add a new chart. So it defaulted to just a bar. So since we're on the bar, maybe we'll change a few different things here. So maybe I want to get a count of status. And you can see we have that. So some count for this particular thing is pretty much the same. But you're going to see I have the ability to show, you can see the little show drop down. I could show some additional stuff. So right now it's not kind of just, if you hover over, it's going to kind of show you the count there. So 33 are request and 2 are waiting for customer. But I can also just choose to show the value as well without having to do the hover. And you can see it put the number 33 right there. But also something new, I have the ability to add an additional column, as it's called. So this is really kind of subtotaling. So I want to get a count of status by maybe priority. So you can see now it has it broken down. So we still have the request in progress waiting for customer, but now it's broken down priority. So the blue lines are the mediums, and then it's stacked with the high, and then the planning is last. So this is what it looks like when it's stacked. See, I have count versus distinct count here, but I could also do stack percentages, or let's show maybe a side by side. So instead of stacked, you could see them side by side. So I could see my things in my request status broken down by priority. Maybe I'll switch quickly just to a pie chart to show you that as well. So you can see the new look and feel there, and the hover also works with the pie chart. But here, maybe I want to do percentage instead of value. And you can see instead of showing the count, it shows the percentage, but you can still get the count with the hover. Quickly moving on to resizing, you can kind of just grab and make things bigger. With these columns down here, you could also resize them, and when you export to PDF, that'll be preserved. If I just go back to the main footprints window, as I mentioned, the widgets here on in the console are a little bit bigger, so they take up some more space. But you always have the ability to kind of expand and collapse that to get it out of your way if you're looking to just go with the things here in the views. But also, you have the ability here to kind of change size. It may or may not help depending on what you're doing. So finally, some other things to note. We've added additional platform support. So there's official support for Windows 2016 and Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7. And along with that, the retirement for support for Red Hat Enterprise Linux 5, which I'm sure it'll probably still work. Additional browser support, so support for the Microsoft Edge browser, and consequently the retirement of Internet Explorer 9 and 10, which once again, I'm sure they'll still work. They're just no longer being tested. Product name change, back to the original name of Footprints, so dropping Service Core. So there's probably not much in the product you'll notice because Service Core wasn't very prevalent, especially for day-to-day use. But officially with this release, there's no more Service Core, and throughout the entire company, you've probably already seen some changes to various websites and pages and Service Core being dropped. So just back to the original name of Footprints, so you see that. Migration tools, so one of the prerequisites to kind of use the migration tools to import configuration and data into 12 is that 12 had to be untouched, so you couldn't have used it or configured it in any way. Now, to make it a little bit easier, you'll be able to migrate to a system already in use. So if you've kind of installed it, played around with it, configured it a little bit, you still will be able to bring stuff over from 11 to 12. And you'll be able to do it multiple times. So every time you bring things over from 11 to 12, it's just going to create new workspaces. Save search list is now limited. So in the past, everyone who had access to save searches kind of saw in the list every save search. Obviously, if they want to run one that they didn't have permission to see any of the tickets that were going to come back, they wouldn't see anything. But really kind of just to make it a little bit more user-friendly and also hide things from people that shouldn't even know that they exist. Now it's only going to show you searches for things that you have the permission to view the items within that search. So if there's only one item in the search and you don't have permission to view it, it won't show up. If there's 5 different items, so it's a cross-item search, you have permission to at least one of those 5, it'll still show in your list. But if you have permission to 0 of those 5, it's not going to show in your list. So for some people who aren't the admins who get to see everything, they should see condensed lists. So it should make it easier for them to work and also kind of hide things that you don't want them to necessarily know exists as well. There's a new UI for picking the default email user. So when you configure incoming email, there was a drop-down that you had to select for the default email user. So as part of a bug fix, we added a new UI. So the bug was it took a very long time to populate that drop-down, and sometimes it errored out or timed out. So now instead of a drop-down, we're kind of using our traditional user picker where you could type in the first few letters of their name or click the ellipsis on the right, and it's going to give you a paged list. So it's not going to try to load 10,000 people all at once, which is what the old one was doing. And then lastly, as part of another bug fix, anytime someone tried to update a service level target that was linked to many work targets, so people using service level management probably have many work targets, so there might be thousands or tens of thousands. As you know, with the Footprints rules, we have the unlinked item update trigger. So anytime there was an update to a service level target, it was going through sometimes tens of thousands of tickets and checking every single rule for every one of them. So once again, there was a major performance problem. So as a fix to that, We're no longer checking the rules that have on-linked item update for work target to service level target. So in other words, if you update the service level target, there's no way to update your work targets. Probably not something that was very useful anyway, but something to note in case it was something you were using. Okay, if you need to get in touch with us in the future for anything, we have kind of the communities, the insiders community for those that are partners or work at BMZ, and then the public community for everyone. So thank you very much and have a good day.